So the second core of Bleach Thousand Year Blood War has finished airing, and you know what that means. Time to piss off some Bleach fans. In all seriousness, the second part was disappointing. In fact, a lot of people noticed the flaws this time around, which is why this video is entitled Not That Well Animated. Let's talk about the newest season of Bleach. Make sure to subscribe. Now, let's start off with the positives, which sadly enough won't take long. The overall direction was a lot better this time around. This is one of the issues I had with the first part, the direction feeling lackluster and generic. Thankfully, that's not the case this time around. Every director and storyboard artist involved with this project went above and beyond. Every episode featured a ton of creative shots and cool concepts. The direction tried its best to make up for the overall lack of movement, and it almost succeeded. The episodes used strong color palettes, CGI-aided dynamic shots, and cool-looking camera placements. Storyboard-wise, this didn't feel like a generic shonen, which is great. I loved the way this show handled some of the large-scale attacks and bankais. I'll give them several points for creativity. Also, the general art quality was respectably good. The fact that the show barely moved certainly helped with that. They pulled out some amazing drawings here and there. The character designs for this show look great, so the scenes being well drawn and on model is a treat for the eyes. The sharp lines and the deliberately strong shading looked fantastic. Also, the compositing generally worked well with the non-action scenes. This show is very screenshotable. Also, despite the overall lack of movement, the action animation did have its moments. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. I'll talk more about these scenes once I get to them. Sadly, that's about it as far as the positives go. If you're a Bleach fan who cannot comprehend the concept of criticism, I recommend clicking off. Now, this core had a lot of action. Nearly every episode featured a fight or two. Sadly, the action animation department was lacking. And it's easy to point out the stiff-looking scenes, but let's try and understand why this core didn't have the animation highs that the previous core did. And trust me, it's not that difficult to understand. You don't need to be an animation savant to follow along. Ready? Here goes. In order to have good action animation, a show needs action animators. The previous core had quite a few of them. This core didn't for the most part. Core 1's action can essentially be divided into two categories, Episode 6 and not Episode 6. The 6th episode featured major names, the likes of Sawslot and Kyukawa, while animator/animation director Yoshihiro Kano carried the action for some of the remaining episodes. Yoshihiro Kano was a crucial part of the first core, although he was credited as a key animator for just one episode. So then, why was he so important, you might ask? That's because of the work he did as the action/effects animation director. He made heavy corrections to the episodes he was involved with. In some cases, he would straight up redraw some of the cuts, which would then be finished by some other animator. His fingerprints were all over this show, even when he wasn't credited. Episode 5, for example, reused a cut from the original trailer, and the trailer itself was corrected by Kano. Thus his work was present in an episode he wasn't involved with. That's how important he was to this show. Now, guess what he did for the second core? The answer is absolutely nothing. He wasn't involved with the second part. Yoshihiro Kano's departure was possibly the biggest blow to this series. Without him, the show's action backbone was gone. By the way, Kano is probably busy with other projects, most notably the upcoming Solo Leveling anime. Then what about episode 6? Kano wasn't involved with that episode, but it looked amazing regardless. Well, episode 6 was more of a special attraction. Most of the people who worked on that episode, the likes of Kyukawa, Sawslot, Ryan White and Kenny Maizumi, didn't work on the second part. Another major name is Hiroyuki Yamashita. He did a fair bit of work for the first part. He animated this wonderful sequence from the first episode, and he was an animation director for the iconic 6th episode. He did work on the second part, but his contribution wasn't that significant. He animated this wonderful non-action sequence. The drawings are immaculate here. Yamashita's character art is one of the best in the industry, but people generally don't notice subtle scenes like these, especially in an action-heavy show. Yamashita did animate a few action scenes. Unfortunately, his work on episode 7 was barely recognizable. According to people who know more than I do, his contribution was limited to rough layouts. And his LO was heavily edited by animation directors and second key animators. On top of that, the compositing, which we'll get to in just a second, altered his work beyond recognition. His sequence from the final episode was better, but still not as impressive as his work on the previous part. And because of all these reasons, the action in this show felt underwhelming. A lot of the action was limited, aka it consisted of the same few frames being looped over instead of uniquely animated movement. A lot of cuts got that still frame with speed lines treatment. Even when the scenes did move, they felt stiff. All while some of the scenes were simply unremarkable. The show could manage small bursts of good action animation at a time. Yugen was responsible for some of the best cuts, although his work in the previous score was more impressive. He is really talented, but he has worked on 9 different episodes so far. I think his ability is being stretched thin. Mitchell Gonzalez animated a decent bit of action with some amazing smears and tight choreography. Other highlights include this lovely impact frame sequence animated by this individual, whose name I won't attempt to pronounce, and this cool bit of action animated by Rio. The perspective here looks really cool. Aside from these short highlights, the animation felt basic. Again, the cuts barely moved, and when they did, it felt stiff. Some of the action cuts were close-ups, which means they couldn't realize the complete scope of these scenes. The show did have some visually interesting moments, mostly thanks to the CGI-aided shot composition, although the actual CGI models were whatever. This isn't bad, but this isn't good either. I wanted this anime to be more animated, if that makes sense. Like I said, this season lacked action animators, although this season did have plenty of effects animators. Well, 2 main ones, but you get the idea. 2 incredible effects animators, Satoshi Sakai and Takashi Hashimoto, worked on this show. Both were action and effects animation directors this time around, and this show did have its fair share of decent effects animation, but these scenes did get nerfed. Which brings us to another major issue with this part, or this entire show for that matter. Whenever someone criticizes this show, they always bring up the fact that the animation itself is lacking, and the compositing is the reason why the show looks good. And in my opinion, that isn't true. The compositing isn't good either, at least as far as the effects animation is concerned. Be honest, does this scene look good to you? If your answer to that was yes, do you also enjoy staring directly into a f***ing light bulb? What part of this looks appealing? This is a textbook example of what I call visual vomit. The compositing makes the effects jarring to look at, with the overbearingly strong presentation, annoying filters, and particle effects. Thanks to the compositing, the effects look synthetic. They look fake. There's no organicness to them. Of course, I'm fine with the compositing altering the effects, but not to this extent. Bleach did what many people accuse Ufotable of doing, except they didn't do it well. Of course, it does come down to personal preference, but come on. Remember that phase where YouTubers would use bright colors in their thumbnails to try and get clicks from 10-year-olds on their mom's iPads? Bleach is the anime equivalent of 2018 YouTube thumbnails. Every raindrop here has artificial filters added to them. It's so obnoxious. A whole bunch of colorful nothing. In my opinion, the compositing was detrimental to the show, especially to the effects animation. It's too bright, it's too busy, and it looks synthetic. And that just about does it. I was disappointed, and I tried my best to explain why. Feel free to crucify me down in the comments. That's about it. Did you like this video? Check out this other bit of content on screen. Make sure to like and subscribe, and until next time.